So picture this. You're drifting to the cold emptiness of space, billions of miles from the nearest inhabited world, and your sensors pick up something unusual. Captain David Mitchell had seen this scenario play out dozens of times over the past 3 years. His research vessel Discovery specialized in finding the remnants of dead civilizations, cataloging what was left behind when entire species vanished into history. It wasn't glamorous work, but someone had to do it. "Another one, Captain," called out Lieutenant Rebecca Hayes from the sensor station, her voice carrying that familiar mix of curiosity and resignation. "Looks like a generation ship, maybe 4 clicks long. She's been drifting for a while by the looks of it." Mitchell rubbed his tired eyes and walked over to peer at the readings. The ship appeared on their main screen, a massive, elongated vessel that had clearly seen better days. Its hull was pockmarked with countless tiny impacts from space debris, and several sections showed the telltale signs of emergency, repairs done with whatever materials the inhabitants could find. This wasn't unusual. Over the centuries, they discovered hundreds of these refugee ships, all carrying the same tragic story of peoples fleeing dying worlds, only to find death waiting for them in the void. "Any life signs?" Mitchell asked, though he already suspected the answer. Hayes frowned at her instruments. "That's the weird thing, sir. I'm getting faint readings. Could be just residual power from automated systems, but—" She paused, adjusting her controls. "Actually, Captain, I think there might be someone alive over there." The bridge fell silent. In 3 years of deep space archaeology, they'd never found survivors. Dr. Amanda Torres, the team specialist in alien cultures, looked up from her research station with genuine excitement in her eyes. "If there are survivors, we need to be extremely careful about first contact protocols. After centuries of isolation, they could be traumatized, possibly hostile." Mitchell nodded slowly. "Hayes, scan for weapon systems. Engineering, what's their power situation looking like?" Chief Engineer Tom Bradley checked his readings and shook his head. "Barely functioning, Captain. Life support is running on fumes. Artificial gravity is failing in multiple sections, and their main reactor is operating at maybe 5% capacity. If anyone's alive over there, they won't be for much longer." As the Discovery moved closer to the derelict vessel, the details became clearer and more heartbreaking. This wasn't just a ship. It was someone's entire world, their last hope, slowly dying in the darkness. Observation ports dotted the hull, and through some of them, they could see dim lights flickering weakly inside. Gardens that had once been green and vibrant were now brown and withered. Children's toys floated in zero-gravity corridors where families had once lived and laughed. "Captain," Dr. Torres said softly, "look at the architecture. Those curved sections, the way the living areas are arranged around what looks like a central crystal formation. I think we're looking at a Vethkai vessel." Mitchell had heard of the Vethkai in theoretical discussions among xenobiologists, but they were considered extinct. These crystalline beings were supposed to be incredibly beautiful, with bodies that could refract light in stunning patterns. Their homeworld had been consumed by their dying star over 400 years ago, and while some refugee ships were known to have escaped, none had ever been found. "If you're right, Torres, then we're looking at the last survivors of their entire species," Mitchell said quietly. "Get me a communication channel. Let's see if anyone can hear us." The first attempt at communication met with silence. Then the second. On the third try, something incredible happened. A weak signal came through their speakers. Not words, but something that sounded almost musical, like crystal chimes being struck by a gentle breeze. Dr. Torres immediately began working to translate the mathematical patterns hidden in the melody. "They're responding, Captain, but they're terrified," Torres reported, her hands flying over her translation software. "They keep repeating something that roughly translates to, 'We submit to the Void Hunters.' I think they believe we're here to destroy them." Mitchell felt his heart sink. These people had been running for so long, seen so much death and loss, that they couldn't even imagine someone might be here to help. When the Discovery's crew finally managed to establish visual contact, what they saw on their screens left everyone speechless. The Vethkai were indeed beautiful, but in a heartbreaking way. Their crystalline skin, which should have sparkled with inner light, was dull and cloudy. Their movements were slow and careful, as if they were afraid their bodies might shatter. Children clung to adults who looked ancient beyond their years, and in the background, they could see others lying motionless. Whether sleeping or dying, no one could tell. But it was when the eldest among them began to weep that Mitchell knew they had to act fast. Those tears caught what little light remained in their failing ship and sparkled like liquid starlight. Each drop a testament to centuries of loss and the crushing weight of being the last of their kind. These people didn't just think death had come for them. They were welcoming it, because after 300 years of barely surviving in their failing vessel, they had finally given up hope. Mitchell looked around his bridge at his crew, seeing his own determination reflected in their faces. All right, people, change of mission. We're not archaeologists today. We're rescue workers. You know what makes humans special? It's not our technology or our weapons or even our intelligence. It's that moment when we see someone suffering and our first instinct isn't to walk away. It's to roll up our sleeves and ask, how can we help? That's exactly what happened next, and it's something that still gives me chills every time I think about it. Captain Mitchell didn't hesitate for even a second. While the Vethkai elders were still weeping those starlight tears, convinced their final hour had come, Mitchell was already on the emergency communication system, calling for immediate assistance. This is Captain David Mitchell of the Discovery to all ships in Sector 7. We have a humanitarian crisis requiring immediate response. Repeat, we need all available vessels for emergency rescue operations. But Dr. Amanda Torres was already one step ahead, running detailed scans of the Vethkai survivors. What she found made her blood run cold. Captain, this is much worse than system failures, she called out, her voice tight with urgency. These people aren't just starving or running out of air. They're dying at a cellular level. See, here's what Torres discovered that changed everything. The Vethkai weren't just pretty to look at. Their entire biology was based on crystalline structures that needed constant renewal. Think of it like how we need vitamins and minerals to stay healthy. Except for them, it was literally a matter of life and death. Their bodies were living crystals that required specific compounds to maintain their structure and that amazing inner light they were famous for. Their ship's mineral processing systems failed decades ago. Torres explained to the gathered crew, her tablet showing devastating scan results. Without the right elements, their bodies can't regenerate properly. They're essentially turning to brittle glass from the inside out. The children are the worst affected because their growing bodies need the most nutrients. Imagine that for a moment. Picture watching your own child slowly losing their spark, literally becoming more fragile every day. The older Vethkai had been watching this horror unfold for generations, helpless to stop it. Parents holding babies who were barely glowing, knowing that each day brought them closer to shattering like delicate ornaments. The worst part? They'd tried everything they could think of. The ship's engineers had attempted to synthesize the needed minerals from their recycling systems, but the machinery was ancient and breaking down. They'd rationed what little they had, giving the children priority, but it was like trying to fill an ocean with a teaspoon. The adults had been slowly sacrificing their own health, their own crystalline integrity, to give their young ones just a few more months of life. But humans? We looked at this impossible situation and said, hold our coffee. Chief Engineer Tom Bradley was already pulling up asteroid composition charts before Torres had finished her explanation. Captain, there's a mineral-rich asteroid field about 6 hours out. If the doc can tell me exactly what they need, I can have mining crews out there by tonight. And that's when humanity showed what we're really made of. Within hours, not days, not weeks, but hours, human ships were launching mining operations that would have taken most species months to organize. The merchant vessel Prosperity diverted from its trade route to help. The mining ship Iron Mountain dropped everything and fired up its extractors. Even civilian pleasure craft joined in, their owners volunteering to transport supplies. Dr. Torres worked around the clock with the surviving Vethkai scientists, creating a perfect formula of the minerals their people needed. It wasn't easy. The compounds had to be in exact ratios, processed in specific ways, and delivered in a form their crystalline biology could actually absorb. One mistake could poison them instead of healing them. But here's the moment that still makes grown humans cry when they hear this story. The first batch of synthesized minerals was ready just as the youngest Vethkai children were beginning to fade completely. These little ones, no bigger than human toddlers, were so dull and brittle that their parents were afraid to even touch them. Torres herself administered the first doses, her hands shaking as she prepared the mineral supplements. The Vethkai parents gathered around, their own dim forms trembling with mixture of hope and terror. What if it was too late? What if human science couldn't save their children after all? Then it happened, slowly, like the sunrise after the longest night. The children began to glow, not all at once, but gradually. Their crystalline skin started catching and reflecting light again. Their bodies grew stronger, less brittle. The oldest child, a girl named something that roughly translated to fading star, suddenly sparkled so brightly that she lit up the entire medical bay. For the first time in decades, Vethkai children were laughing. They were running and playing without their parents fearing they might shatter. Adult Vethkai who had resigned themselves to death began to stand straighter as their own bodies started to heal. The ship that had been a tomb was becoming a nursery again. And the humans? They just smiled and got back to work, because this was only the beginning. Now this is where the story gets absolutely incredible, and honestly, it's the part that makes me proud to be human. Because when word got back to Earth about what had happened with the Vethkai, something amazing occurred. The government didn't just say, "Good job, send them on their way." The people didn't shrug and go back to their daily lives. Instead, humanity did what we do best when we really care about something. We went completely overboard in the most beautiful way possible. President Catherine Walsh called an emergency session of the Colonial Council within 48 hours of receiving Captain Mitchell's report. But here's the thing, they didn't spend months debating and forming committees like you'd expect from politicians. Instead, Walsh stood up in front of the entire assembly and said something that became legendary. We have the chance to save an entire species from extinction. If we're not willing to do that, then what exactly are we doing out here among the stars? The response was immediate and overwhelming. Earth's colonial administration didn't just offer the Vethkai a new home, they offered them choices. 17 different worlds, each one personally surveyed by teams of scientists, geologists, and environmental specialists. Think about the cost of that for a moment. We're talking about sending survey ships to 17 different planets, conducting months of detailed analysis on each one, all for a species that wasn't even human. The survey teams worked like they were choosing homes for their own families. Dr. Jennifer Costa led the geological surveys, spending weeks on each world testing mineral compositions and crystal formations. These people have been through enough, she told her team. We're not just finding them a place to survive, we're finding them a place where they can truly live again. Meanwhile, something even more extraordinary was happening back on Earth and in the colonies. News about the Vethkai had spread through human space, and the response was unlike anything historians had ever documented. Regular families, not scientists or diplomats, just ordinary people, started volunteering to host Vethkai refugees in their homes while the permanent settlements were being prepared. At first, everyone thought this was crazy. How do you house crystalline beings who need specific minerals and have completely different biology? But humans being humans, we figured it out. Families started converting spare rooms, installing special lighting that helped the Vethkai maintain their health, and learning to prepare the mineral supplements their guests needed. The Johnson family in New Geneva Colony were among the first volunteers. They took in an elderly Vethkai couple named something that translated roughly to quiet harmony and distant thunder. Within days, their 8-year-old son Danny was following the elderly aliens around like a devoted puppy, fascinated by how they moved and communicated. And that's when the real magic started happening. The cultural exchange wasn't just adults being polite to each other. It was children being children, curious and fearless, and absolutely amazed by their new friends. Danny Johnson became the first human child to learn what the Vethkai called stone singing. Picture this, a little human boy and 2 ancient crystalline beings sitting in the garden, humming together while rocks literally reshaped themselves into beautiful sculptures. The Vethkai could produce harmonic frequencies with their crystalline bodies that resonated with stone and metal at a molecular level. They didn't just move rocks around. They convinced them to become something else entirely. A simple stone would flow like liquid, reshaping itself into intricate art pieces or useful tools, all guided by the gentle songs of these remarkable beings. But the humans weren't just taking, we were giving too. Dr. Lisa Chun, a pediatric physician, started teaching young Vethkai about human biology, and what she discovered changed both species forever. She showed them how human bodies work, how our hearts pump blood through thousands of miles of vessels, how our brains fire electrical signals faster than lightning, how our muscles contract and expand in perfect coordination. Your bodies are symphonies, she told a group of fascinated young Vethkai. Every heartbeat, every breath, every thought is part of an incredible orchestra that plays the music of life. She used simple instruments to let them hear their own heartbeats, see their own electrical patterns, understand the chemistry that kept them alive. The Vethkai were amazed. They'd always seen humans as solid, unchanging creatures, but now they understood we were just as dynamic and complex as their own crystalline forms, just in different ways. Human children learned to listen to stone and sing to crystals. Vethkai youngsters learned to appreciate the electrical music that played constantly in every living human body. Families started creating fusion gardens where human plants grew alongside Vethkai crystal formations, creating something neither species had ever imagined possible. Children of both species played together, learned together, and created art that combined stone singing with human creativity. This wasn't just refugee assistance anymore. This was two species choosing to become something greater together. And the best part? This was all happening while the scientists were still surveying those 17 potential worlds, because humans had decided that helping didn't have to wait for perfect conditions. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is open your door and say, "Come in, your family now." Look, I wish I could tell you everything was perfect from that point forward, but that's not how real life works. Even the most beautiful stories have their rough patches, and this one was no different. As news of the Vethkai integration spread throughout human space, not everyone was thrilled about what was happening. The trouble started in the outer colonies, places where resources were already tight and people worked hard to survive. Governor Patricia Hayes of the Frontier Station made headlines when she publicly questioned the wisdom of spending billions on aliens while our own people struggle for basic necessities. Her words struck a nerve with colonists who were already dealing with equipment failures, food shortages, and the constant stress of frontier life. Don't get me wrong, Hayes said during a heated colonial council meeting that was broadcast across human space. I feel sorry for these crystal people, but we've got families here who can't afford proper medical care. We've got children who don't have enough protein in their diets. When did we decide that alien welfare was more important than human welfare? Her words sparked protests on a dozen worlds. Some colonies started refusing to contribute resources to the Vethkai assistance programs. Others went further, actually passing local laws that would prevent Vethkai refugees from settling in their territories. The unity that had initially surrounded the rescue mission began to crack, and politicians started taking sides. But the problems weren't just coming from humans. Within the Vethkai community itself, a group of traditionalist elders was growing increasingly worried about what they saw as a contamination of their ancient culture. These elders, led by an impressive figure whose name roughly translated to Keeper of Ancient Songs, argued that their people were losing themselves in their eagerness to integrate with humans. "We have survived for 400 years by maintaining who we are," Keeper told his followers during secret gatherings on their temporary settlements. "Now we watch our children abandon the old ways, learning to think like humans, forgetting the pure songs of our ancestors. We are not just losing our homeland, we are losing our souls." The tension between traditionalists and integrationists split many Vethkai families. Parents watched helplessly as their children chose human customs over ancient traditions. Some young Vethkai even started modifying their crystalline bodies to look more human-like, dulling their natural glow to fit in better. The very thing that made them unique was being abandoned by their own people. Things reached a breaking point when the survey teams finally announced their recommendation. Of the 17 worlds that had been studied, one stood out above all others, a planet they officially designated as Kepler 442c, but which the Vethkai immediately renamed Harmony Prime. This world was incredibly rich in the minerals they needed, with vast crystal caves and the perfect atmospheric conditions for their people to thrive. The first settlements were established with great ceremony. Thousands of HFY, along with their human friends and supporters, worked together to build something amazing, cities that were part human technology, part HFY crystal-shaping artistry. The architecture was unlike anything either species had created alone. Buildings that grew from the ground like living crystals but contained all the practical systems humans needed to survive. Then disaster struck, and it came without warning. Harmony Prime, for all its beauty and mineral wealth, sat on an incredibly unstable geological foundation. The planet's core was more active than anyone had realized, and the weight of the new settlements, combined with extensive mining operations, triggered something catastrophic. Massive earthquakes began tearing across the main continent, threatening to destroy everything both species had built together. The first quake registered 8.7 on the seismic scale and lasted for nearly 10 minutes. Buildings that had taken months to construct were reduced to rubble in seconds. The crystal formations that the HFY had shaped into homes and community centers shattered like glass. Worst of all, the main mineral processing facility, the lifeline that kept the HFY healthy, was completely destroyed. In the immediate aftermath, with aftershocks continuing to rock the planet, the old division seemed ready to resurface. Some human engineers wanted to evacuate immediately, arguing that the planet was simply too dangerous to inhabit. HFY traditionalists saw the disaster as proof that they shouldn't have abandoned their ships and their old ways. But then something beautiful happened. As rescue teams rushed to help survivors trapped in the wreckage, they discovered something extraordinary. Dr. Robert Kim, the chief geological engineer, realized that the earthquake patterns weren't random. They followed the same mathematical principles that governed HFY's stone-singing techniques. "The planet is singing," he told an emergency assembly of both human and HFY leaders. "It's not just random seismic activity. There's a harmonic pattern here. If we can understand it, maybe we can work with it instead of against it." That's when human science and HFY artistry came together in ways nobody had ever imagined. Human engineers used their technology to map the planet's seismic patterns, while HFY crystal shapers listened to the deep songs coming from the planet's core. Working together, they developed techniques to literally harmonize with the planet itself, singing the unstable fault lines into stability. It took months of careful work, with human families and HFY clans working side by side in the most dangerous conditions imaginable. But they did it. They didn't just stop the earthquakes. They turned Harmony Prime into the most geologically stable planet in human space. Neither species could have achieved this miracle alone, but together, they made the impossible look routine. Now here's where the story becomes absolutely mind-blowing. Fast forward 75 years. 3 full generations of humans and HFY growing up together, and what you see is something that still makes visitors to Harmony Prime stop dead in their tracks and just stare and wonder. The planet that had once nearly killed everyone with its earthquakes became the crown jewel of human civilization. But calling it a human world doesn't really capture what Harmony Prime actually is. Picture cities that look like they were grown rather than built. Massive crystal spires that rise from the ground in perfect spirals, their surfaces catching sunlight and throwing rainbows across streets that hum with gentle harmonic frequencies. These aren't just pretty buildings, either. The crystal structures that the HFY shape are living architecture. They respond to the needs of their inhabitants, growing new rooms when families expand, adjusting their internal temperatures based on the weather, even changing their acoustic properties for concerts or meetings. Human engineers work alongside HFY crystal singers to create buildings that are essentially giant musical instruments, each one adding its voice to the planet's ever-changing symphony. Dr. Kevin Walsh, the great-grandson of one of the original rescue mission crew members, grew up in one of these crystal homes. "People ask me what it's like living in a building that's alive," he says with a laugh. But that's the wrong question. The right question is, why would anyone want to live in a dead building when you could live in one that cares about you? The transformation wasn't just architectural. It was technological. The HFY's ability to manipulate matter through harmonic frequencies revolutionized everything humans thought they knew about engineering. Spacecraft construction that used to take years now happens in months, with HFY's singers literally coaxing metal and composite materials into the exact shapes needed. Their harmonics can strengthen materials at the molecular level, making human ships faster, safer, and more efficient than anything we'd ever built before. But the humans gave just as much as they received. Human adaptability and scientific method gave the Vethkai tools their ancestors never could have imagined. Traditional Vethkai crystal shaping was limited to working with natural stone formations. Human materials science opened up entire new worlds of possibility. Young Vethkai learned to sing to synthetic polymers, rare earth elements, even exotic matter that exists only in laboratory conditions. The real magic happened in the children, kids who grew up bilingual, speaking both human languages and the complex harmonic languages of the Vethkai, develop abilities that amaze scientists from both species. These hybrid culture children could communicate with dolphins using harmonic frequencies, diagnose mechanical problems by listening to engine sounds, and even help develop new medical treatments by understanding how sound waves affect cellular repair. Lieutenant Commander Diana Foster represents everything beautiful about this new generation. Half of her crew aboard the exploration vessel New Horizons consists of young Vethkai who use their unique abilities to make first contact with newly discovered species. When they encountered the shy, underground-dwelling court in the Andromeda sector, it was Vethkai crew members who figured out how to communicate through seismic vibrations, opening up relations with an entire civilization that had been hiding beneath their planet's surface for millennia. These young Vethkai aren't just crew members, Foster explains. They're cultural bridges. They understand what it's like to be different, to be afraid, to worry about losing your identity when meeting something bigger than yourself. They have a gift for making others feel safe. The numbers tell an incredible story. Those 3,000 desperate survivors on that failing generation ship have become a thriving civilization of over 8 million Vethkai spread across 47 different worlds. But more importantly, they've maintained their culture while embracing change. Modern Vethkai still sing the ancient songs of their ancestors, but they've also composed entirely new harmonies that incorporate human musical traditions and the voices of a dozen other species they've encountered. The impact on galactic civilization has been profound. Other alien species, many of whom have been suspicious or hostile toward humans, began to see us differently after witnessing what happened with the Vethkai. The Zerati Confederation, a powerful alliance that had previously refused all contact with human colonies, sent an official delegation to Harmony Prime specifically to understand how two such different species could not just coexist, but thrive together. Ambassador Rachel Thompson, who led the first interspecies culture exchange program, put it perfectly. The Vethkai partnership changed how the galaxy sees humanity. We went from being seen as just another aggressive, expanding species to being recognized as people who choose cooperation over conquest. That reputation has opened doors that military might never could have. But perhaps the most important transformation is philosophical. The story of the Vethkai has become required study in schools throughout human space, not just as history, but as proof of what's possible when people choose compassion over fear. Children learn that extinction isn't inevitable, that dying cultures can be reborn, and that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is admit you need help. Today, when human exploration ships encounter species in crisis, the first call they make isn't to military command. It's to the Vethkai Cultural Exchange Corps, because we've learned that salvation often comes from the most unexpected places. Strangers who choose to see potential instead of problems, hope instead of burden. The universe is vast and full of wonders, but nothing is more wonderful than the simple choice to care about someone different from yourself.